Grammy-nominated multi-instrumentalist Andrew Bird spans genres from jazz and swing to folk and indie rock. With 20 studio and live albums released, he has traveled the globe collaborating with artists like Preservation Hall Jazz Band, Madison Cunningham, St. Vincent, and more. His latest album, Sunday Morning Put On, was released on May 24th. Andrew Bird is joined by a jazz trio on this album as he gives us a new exploration of the Great American Songbook. He will be stopping in Denver June 2nd for a performance at the Outside Festival, and we're looking forward to having you in town. It is our pleasure to welcome Andrew Bird on KUVO. Hi, Andrew.
Hey, how you doing?
We're doing great. Thank you so much for meeting with us.
Mhm.
We're really excited about your new album and that it looks back at your roots in jazz. I know back in the 90s, you were playing swing and jazz with the Squirrel Nut Zippers, and you've since done a lot of different things genre-wise. One thing I admire about you as an artist is your desire to shake things up. You reach for a new level of art with new release, a couple of interesting creative spots on your journey. I loved the interactive collaboration with your mom, the album accompanied by storytelling prints, the fact that you took a Western adventure and recorded an entire album inside the Coyote Gulch canyons of Utah. This is a look back to jazz, but a little bit different than what you were doing back in the 90s. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, back in my 20s, I was very immersed in jazz and early 20th century music, country blues and gospel and but it was mostly in hot jazz, like gypsy jazz, 20s, 30s, a different kind of uh, style of playing than what this new release is. Um, but I kind of is the jazz evolutionary tree for me is kind of I follow players from Louis Armstrong and Django Reinhardt, and then the great tenor players like Lester Young, Coleman Hawkins, who became contemporaries of you know they were bebop adjacent in the 40s, and when they get into the 50s in their late career, they made these beautiful records with small groups for the Verve label, and that's kind of to me that's the apex of what I love in jazz and sought to kind of pay tribute to on this album.
I just have to tell you first off, I've listened to the album bit by bit. When the first two came out, I was just like, oh my gosh. What I have to say is that you're not doing it like a tourist. This is not, like it's legit. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that, but there are a lot of times when people have played jazz songs like these that they just are covers. And what you're doing is bringing you're bringing yourself to it. And that's what makes it jazz after all, is it dives into yourself. It didn't sound like you were imitating anybody. It's just beautiful. And
Thank you.
uh, I'm curious, as so much as a songwriter, you're doing arrangements here of the Great American Songbook. And usually when I hear that Great American Songbook, I think I'll go at this is going to be corny, but
Mhm.
wow, it's just really wonderful. How did you pick out these songs, and what brought you to this?
Um, well, I finished my last song album, the Inside Problems, and I between albums I like to delve into something I haven't really given myself the room to do on my own albums. And this one was like a sort of jazz sabbatical to kind of like after 30 years of listening and playing, but mostly being a listener and soaking it up. I wanted to see if I really woodshed it and spent the winter trying, studying what Coleman Hawkins was doing, and if I could get to a higher level as a improviser. Um, and uh, yeah, I I just was a student of the music for a while. But as far as choosing the songs go, my really the tunes that I studied are not the ones that ended up on the album, like Body and Soul, uh, Stardust. Those are the ones I worked the hardest on, and for some reason they didn't really transcend You know, our goal as a trio was like, how can we offer something new, you know, with these songs that have been done thousands of times. And that was the first choice, was to be a trio, to keep it, you know, bass drum and violin. That's two fretless instruments and drums. So it's like very, very spare, very skeletal. And so that gave us a lot of room to kind of mess with the arrangements. We didn't always want to just do that, play the head, cycle through the changes, and pass around solos and trade forwards with the drummer, like the way it's generally done in a sort of rote way. Sometimes we would straighten out the uh, the changes a little bit so that there'd be room to get more atmospheric. You know, we were just kind of messing with the forms a bit, and looking for little motifs and melodies that would pop up out of the improvisations, and then hammer them into the arrangements.
One thing you really experimented with that caught my eye was, and Andy's eye too, was your experimentation with tone with your violin and your voice, and you touch upon it in some of the press material that's been released, trying to emulate a saxophone. Was that challenging? Like, how did you get yourself into that headspace?
I mean, it's something my playing, since I left classical music when I was 21, my technique has drifted. I have the basic technique to play whatever I might want to play, but it's just sort of unconsciously drifted away from being a violinist to playing more like a saxophone player, like a reed player. And as far as my phrasing goes, I think of it as a breath full of air. You know, that the phrase is a breath, even though you don't have to breathe with the violin. And it's more fluid and less articulated than a violinist might be. And as far as like the bow on the string versus the pressure of the air on the reed, you know, it's a very similar thing. You can, especially I play like a 5-string violin, so I've got this low C, and you can really lay into it and get that kind of, you know, when tenor players can really push the edge of their sound where it starts to break up a little bit. Same thing can happen with the violin. There's just a lot of uh, I don't know how to describe it, but those are my favorite instrumentalists are the great tenor players. Like I mentioned, Lester Young, Coleman Hawkins, Don Byas, kind of more underrated one. Love those players. And I love the rhythm sections that would back them up. Like they were still laying down the 4 on the floor thing, so they had incredible amount of freedom in their solos. And yeah,
I wondered about when I heard it at first, I was like, is he playing viola there? Because that's what it is, that extra
it's
lower string. Yeah, I was
yeah,
wondering what was going
it's
on
like
there.
a violin, but it's a little bigger than a violin. But it's not quite a viola. It just has the whole from low
Yeah,
C to a high E.
sure. That's what I was hearing there. What a great band you've got, Ted Poor and Alan Hampton. How did you come to hook up with these guys?
Well, they're basically my band, my touring band.
Hmm.
Um, but I met Ted. I was making a jazz album with Todd Sickoff, who's a great bass player, and Ted was on the session, and he just blew my mind. He was so good, so much energy, and he's just listening so intently to everything that everyone's doing. And Alan's been my main guy for 12 years, um, and both these guys are more jazz insiders than I am. But before shows, um, we play standards in the dressing room just to get ready for the shows, and just kind of geek out on different, you know, passing chords. And you know, it's just fun to hang with these guys that really know what they're doing. And it's yeah.
Wow, no wonder you're used to playing with them. And what I was reading about this album was you took a live approach to the recording process. And looking back at your last album, Inside, you had talked a little bit, kind of led us into that perfectionism that you can get when you're recording in the studio. Everything has to be
Mhm.
a certain way. Um, and you definitely use that live recording style with Inside, but this time you're doing it with jazz and improvisation on a
Mhm.
different level. What was that like?
Um, well, I always approach recording as a performance, and that's what I love about classic jazz albums is that performance is often recorded in one day. They're just I just love these piano trio records from the 50s and 60s where it's just so like some great lesser known Vince Guaraldi albums that are just no, they don't seem terribly ambitious. They're just playing these tunes, but they're so good, they're so tasteful. And with this, it was we were playing in an old studio in Valentine Studios, live through old UA board. I mean, the gear is everything. The ambiance was very easy to sort of fetishize. It was just, but the point is, it was a very small room, and it's just the three of us, and it doesn't want to. It wanted to hear a light touch to everything, and to try to capture a performance. It was this album actually became more of a vocal album than I expected. I thought we were going to do mostly an instrumental album, but I found that to go from playing a violin solo to singing was kind of a unique thing where it's a continuation of, I mean, there's not that many linear instrumentalists that put down their horn and start singing. I can think of Chet Baker, Louis Armstrong. There's not that many. Mostly it's pianists or whatever, or just vocalists. But I think that's interesting for a listener to listen to an instrumental solo and then have that soloist then sing and to connect those two things. Um, so that surprised me that I ended up singing so much, and in a different way than I sing on my own albums too.
I didn't recognize you at first. I was hearing it and I was like, "Oh, who's that?" And and I said, "Of course, okay." Um, so did Jeff and Larry Goldings, Jeff Parker, did those
Yeah,
guys record live with you, or was that later?
yeah, that was later for side B. We brought in Jeff. Um, Jeff was live. Larry, I did a whole day of just duets with him,
Hmm.
but they were so different they didn't fit on this album.
Mm.
It was very cool. We did like Sweet Lorraine and Stardust, and it just um, it wasn't the right character for this album. But he played on I Fall in Love Too Easily, and Jeff played on the whole side B. Jeff was on the last couple days of sessions.
Well, one thing that caught both of our eyes, and Andy can absolutely relate, are some of your Saturday night listening sessions to jazz radio.
Mm-hmm.
Andy, you said you grew up listening to the same.
Steve Cushing, right?
Yeah,
I love Steve Cushing.
capturing the
Um,
sound and glory
well,
of what was
me as a
around.
DJ comes a little bit out of Steve Cushing, I have to admit.
Oh, well,
Those shows were great.
so
Um,
great.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's, I mean, you could say that's all part of your roots, but you know, were there favorites that stuck out in your head? Vocalists and one thing I consciously noticed.
Mhm.
I don't. I know you like Django, but I'm not hearing Stefan Grappelli coming out of your violin. To your credit, it's there's nothing wrong with having that influence, but I'm not
Right.
hearing other jazz violinists. You're going for the tenor stuff, and
Yeah, I stopped thinking like a violinist a long time ago. I was into him in my, late teens, and I tried to learn some of his solos, but I have a different sensibility
mhm,
from his, and but I mean, he's one of the of all the jazz violinists, he's got some of the nicest tone. I think tone is a big. I don't want to get too negative, but tone is kind of a problem when it comes to violin in most contexts outside of classical. Just very thin and kind of strident. So it's like that's a big thing for me, is to try to get the instrument in these contexts, whether it's rock and roll or jazz, to get it to sound like it. I feel it needs to sound. Um,
Our show, Influence, is all about jazz in other genres, that kind of combination, and really just a welcome mat to people that maybe haven't listened to jazz before. And I feel
mhm.
like your album could really be that welcome mat for people that follow you and people that are into the folk and indie. Is that
Mhm.
exciting to you? It's got to be cool as someone who loves jazz to kind of pour back into the community that way.
Yeah, I mean, I as someone described it, like you know, I didn't do a jazz album. I took jazz and made an Andrew Bird album. Kind of. I definitely. It ended up. I couldn't resist putting it through my own filter, which is generally to find to when I solo. I want to create. I want to find new melodies all the time. That's my goal, not to kind of go off and necessarily into deep waters. Sometimes it is to experiment, but I really, I really want to find a succinct, good melody. And when a song comes in, generally under 4 minutes, I celebrate. Like I don't know, I can't get away from appreciating brevity
Mm.
in in songs. And so yeah, I mean, it's I in this is all to say that the album ends up sounding more like one of my albums than I thought it would. I sing a bit differently, but basically I'm putting it through my sensibilities. So yes, to your question, or what you're saying is, yeah, I think it could turn people on. I think some people have decided that jazz is not for them. Um, and the thing is, it's like under the jazz banner, there's some of the like greatest music ever made, and some of the worst, honestly. But it's you can't just say, jazz is not for me, because it's like, you know, it's this. I mean, some of the records that Sarah Vaughan made are just like the absolute peak of music in general. It's just music, great music.
Do you have any like call outs for recordings or albums that if someone is just getting to jazz that are like top tier for you? They don't have to be like the best ever, but just curious because you mentioned, Vince Guaraldi, Sarah Vaughan. Do you have any favorites rather or
Um,
song recordings even?
yeah, my favorite all-time jazz album is the Jazz Giants '56, with Lester Young, Roy Eldridge, Teddy Wilson, Vic Dickinson. Um, and that is just, it's an instrumental album, a lot of ballads. Every solo is a total masterpiece. It's so understated, beautifully recorded. And Lester Young, I can never quite figure out what he's doing. You know, I've
Join the club.
transcribed solos. Yeah, I can't figure out what he's doing with his phrasing. It is completely otherworldly, yet so satisfying and enjoyable. So I'd recommend that album. Uh, let's see. Um, of course, there's the Chet Baker Sings album. Um, is very is great playing and singing, and I think very accessible to to newcomers to jazz. Um, yeah, Sarah Vaughan. Um, I would say a lot of the Verve albums from the '50s, uh, and anything in the '50s with Coleman Hawkins or Don Byas, those tenor players, Ben
Mm,
Webster. Yeah.
can't go wrong. Thank you. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you seem to really love music in general, obviously, but also love jazz. So it's great to hear some of your picks.
I really think myself that I want more. This was such a success.
Oh,
Your version of Django is killer. It's just so beautiful. Uh, that last song, by the way, who wrote that one? The with the what is it? Memory balloon. I can't
uh,
speak French. I'm
it's
ballon.
balloon of perhaps is
Oh,
uh,
perhaps. Okay.
yeah.
Oh, that
Um, that was
should.
when we finished all the tunes. I said, let's do something free. And I had this melody that then I'm currently writing lyrics for that'll be on the next album. But I just had the melody in my head to kick things off. But the rest of it was just like the chord progression that's Alan just improvising a chord progression that I had to hear where it was going before it goes there, and that's just carving out a little space to do something free in a different mode. Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely be playing it a lot here at the station. I can guarantee you that because it's just so gorgeous and it's it's legit. Like I said, you've done a masterpiece here. Um, and I I'm not going to compare you to Chet Baker. That's not cool, but I got that vibe. It didn't sound like you were trying to be Chet Baker. I'm not saying that, but I like the chill vocal with
Hmm.
with a little kind of chill swing to it, and it still swings. Um, Andrew, man, brilliant. It's just
Thank you.
you know,
It's very beautiful. And you'll be in Denver on June 2nd at the Outside Festival. What do you have in store for that? Are you going to be bringing the jazz trio and sticking more to this vibe or a blend?
It'll be Ted and Alan and myself. It'll be a blend because before that we'll be at the Green Mill in Chicago doing the jazz stuff, and
Yeah.
but it is a big festival, and I think people will be expecting to hear some of the
Yeah,
hits. So
of
it'll be a
course.
mix. We'll probably do Caravan and I Fall in Love Too Easily, or a handful of things.
Great. And that's May 29th kicks off the tour in Chicago, like you said.
Mhm.
And are you excited to share this with the world?
I am. I mean, it's very gratifying to play these tunes. I mean, I've been doing Caravan since I was 19,
Yeah.
and it's nice to play these smaller rooms again, and just the sort of a little more freewheeling set than usual. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for taking some time to speak with us. We're very excited about your new album. It is gorgeous. Enjoyed listening through it. And it's Sunday Morning Put On. It's a tribute to mid-century small group jazz. It's out May 24th on the Loma Vista recordings. Appreciate you so much, Andrew. Thank you so much for meeting with us.
Thank you guys.